Thank you very much, Diana. Good afternoon, everyone. It's really my privilege to be talking on behalf of the community and also bringing community perspectives to what we've been talking about for the past few months. And, we hear about declarations, calls to action, commitments, promises by many leaders, and all of them will remain just words if there is no follow-up, there is no monitoring. I think even as parents, if we promise something to the children and the children don't hold us accountable, we do get away with not delivering. So I think it's important for us to actually look at this. The conflict of interest disclosure outline. I want to just go through the key asks and the principles behind the accountability framework, and then look at who should be accountable, who has the advantage of holding that accountability mechanism, who has the advantage to monitor that, and also take one example of a very successful movement and then look at what is needed for this. So I think we've seen this, the key asks document, so I'm not going to read through that. But basically, there are 5 key asks that a lot of stakeholders across the board have worked on and presented. And it's very simple. It's reach all people, transform, accelerate, invest, and commit. And the guiding principles behind this accountability framework, which is actually supported by the TB community, the affected communities, and the civil society, are just 4: effectiveness, integrity, inclusive, accountable, and transparent. And they are great principles for us to be looking at when we think of the accountability framework. Now, who should be accountable? I think all stakeholders need to be held accountable. Heads of state, national programs, technical partners, donors, civil society organizations, community-based organizations, the affected community. I think all of us need to be held accountable to what we commit to do. Now, who can hold all these entities accountable? All stakeholders need to do that. With respect to all these stakeholders, I think communities really have an advantage over all others. It's the communities that actually see family, friends, members of their community suffer, struggle for lack of access, and continue to die with TB. When we think of the programs, the TB programs, suffering, death can become a mere statistic, a mere number for programs. But for communities, it's very different. Communities actually follow our elected representatives, deliver or not deliver what they promise when they actually give their speech just before the elections. Communities have really nothing to lose. So if our leaders commit and don't deliver, it is the community that's going to be gentle first, raise their arms second, maybe take to the streets after that, which I don't think any of the other stakeholders are in a position to do. Having said that, I just want to take one example from the HIV movement where it really changed. Activism really helped deliver. I want to talk about ACT UP very briefly, which was the AIDS Coalition to Unleash Power, set up in the 1980s. And they started a campaign, Silence is Death. And one of their leaders, an activist, actually said, make a demand that's reasonable and doable, present that demand to the powers that be, who can enact it. And when they refuse, you do civil disobedience until they are forced by pressure to take action. Now, many of us in the TB world may not agree with that sort of an approach, but this saved lives. It brought the price of the only available a drug for HIV down so that it was affordable for people living with HIV, because the HIV community was seeing their lovers, partners, friends in the community dying. So, and then you see the picture in the middle. This was, I think, in 2014. It says people with AIDS are still dying. Obama, keep your AIDS promise. So again, it's the community that can actually say something like that. Now let's look at TB. With 4,600 deaths each day globally, our response, I'm sorry to say, is shameful. We stood up this morning for a minute of silence in memory of people who are dying, even as we speak. The number of people who are dying is far more than natural disasters that happen. I was reading up about the tsunami recently, and the deaths from TB are like 6 tsunamis every year. It's like 13 jumbo jets crashing every day. But I don't think our response matches that. So I think there is a mismatch, and we have been hearing this over and over again, not just from the community, but even from representatives of the governments. So this is the time for TB. This is the opportunity for us to take it and move with a strong effort. Our monitoring and reporting systems are so medicalized in TB. It doesn't reflect the urgency that it needs to. So when that is not there, even our accountability mechanism can become very limp if we are not careful. So both the response, the accountability framework, and the monitoring of it needs to be about people. It needs to be community-led, independent, and fully funded accountability mechanism that can be monitored by the community. It needs an informed, empowered, science-literate community, the TB survivors, and the affected community to do this. The monitoring mechanisms need to be inclusive. I think the TB community, time and again, we do this mistake of excluding people. And I think that can't happen. We need to have everyone at the table doing this together. The person on the ground needs to have the ease of access to whatever mechanisms that we come up with. And that plug-in is very, very important. Look at this. There's a TB champion, an advocate on one side of the picture, and then there's a gentleman who's been struggling to get his medications for TB, but is not able to do that. Now, how do these two people, very different, an empowered TB advocate and a poor person, how do they plug in? How do they bring their angst of things that are happening on the ground to this mechanism that we're talking about? So I think it's very important for us to remember as we think about this. Now, they are both members of the community, and the accountability structure needs to be inclusive. So does the monitoring mechanism. Both of them need to be able to feed into that, be able to feed back into it as well. That feedback loop is missing, and that needs to feature in our monitoring mechanism. Where is the technological edge, that disruptive technology that is actually changing the world today? We need to bring that into TB, into our monitoring mechanism. So it needs to be an inclusive monitoring mechanism with clear process indicators and outcome indicators. And it would have been really best if it was done alongside developing the accountability mechanism framework, but still I think we have an opportunity to do a very inclusive monitoring mechanism. So we don't have all the answers right now. None of us do. But what we can and what we need to do is together. That's very important. In an inclusive way, not leaving anyone behind. Invest in developing an inclusive monitoring mechanism that can actually hold our leaders, our politicians, our parliamentarians, our ministers, our programs, our technical organizations like WHO, Stop TB Partnership, Union maybe, our donors, the civil society organizations, and the communities themselves. Hold them to what we commit so that we cannot just say empty words, because time is ticking, and even as we speak, people are dying. Thank you.